Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This week we're back on the Lincoln Continental. On the last episode you saw Dave do a bunch of fab work and this custom mock-up grill. Well, to start out this episode, I'm gonna start by doing this. Yes, we realized this wasn't the vibe and we listened to all your comments. Sometimes you have to do things for customers so they can see the vision. Even though we knew it wasn't gonna work, y'all know it's not gonna work, but he had to see it for his own eyes. So we are in the process of designing a brand new grill for this thing, but that's not gonna be this episode. For now, we're gonna be jumping back into the engine compartment to do some custom headers. First thing we gotta do is get this car back over to Dave so we can get the dash and the steering column put back in this thing. So let's get to work.
Got our dash back in here, and I also took apart the collar that goes mounted the original steering column, and I have it right here on our new universal steering column. Part of that collar had a bracket that holds the whole brake assembly. I have that loosely bolted up here, forms an L. The original steering wheel and column assembly, you can see here, actually has a flat in it, and our new one is completely round. So even though our collar piece sort of works, the other receiving piece, which is flat, is not going to work because we need another rounded piece. Okay, we got our new steering column in place here, and you can see it has some flex. It's going to be held tight until we get the plate, the bulkhead, that covers up this whole area. We got our piece with our fill tacked on here, and we just go here and slide it in place. It's a little tricky with one hand, but you can see it fits pretty good. And once it's tacked in place, we'll be able to mark exactly where the center hole for mounting our plate will be. So we got our plate tacked on just in a couple places just to hold it right here. And then coming from the inside, we've got the column in place. Got my friendly stand here, piece of 4x4, holding it up into the spot where I want it. I got my clearance right here under my screen. Then I have column coming right down here. I made some marks around the end where it's going to dive through our new piece. So now that the marks are in there, I'm going to cut my two tacks, pull the piece off, and then use a hole saw to drill through and start to mock up and fit our bulkhead assembly here. We got our column in and our ball right there. You can see 3 pieces of hardware, 1, 2, can't see if there's one down there. Fit nicely in our holes that we drilled out. I just have this tacked in. I'm going to be doing final welding later, but it's looking pretty good right here on the inside. You can see the rings right here, the retaining rings that hold the ball in place. And then here's our assembly on our second mount point here for the column. So everything's looking good so far. That's going to be our column mounting, and I saw Mikey walking with a box, so hopefully those are our headers.
Here we have some Godzilla headers from Ultimate Headers. So they do have swap headers for Godzillas, but this is a Continental, so they were unsure that their application was gonna fit. So they sent us the headers all tacked together with some extra material, just in case we have to modify something. Dave's already started taking off the stock manifolds, and we're gonna go ahead and get these things mocked up. Yeah, eh?
Hey.
All right, eh?
So looking at these headers, a few modifications that are gonna need to be made. First off, these first two on the inside are hitting this motor mount, and that's what's kicking them out here as they get tightened up against the block. So these gaps right here that opened up. Secondly, our collector is not really in the best spot because one, it's touching our firewall, and two, where it ends up down here underneath, we want it up higher so we could start our transition under the car earlier. Everything's really low on this car, and we want to keep the exhaust as tucked as possible. So what we're going to do is take the whole assembly off, cut off the collector, put the collector where we want it, and make a temporary brace and tack it somewhere onto the firewall. I have this little mock-up representing our steering shaft. As you can see, that also dives into this header, and if it kept on going, would probably dive into this one as well. So what we're going to try and do instead is swap these two with each other, depending on where our collector is, but we won't know that till we cut it off and hang it where we want it. So let's pull the whole thing off, get it chopped up, put our collector on, put the flange back on, and then we'll see where we're at and what we need to cut and shave and add. So we got our collector, and I just used a hose clamp on the bottom, a piece of thin gauge steel, and then bent it and bolted on to the bell housing. So that way our collector is held in the space that we need. It also makes it kind of adjustable because you could swing your metal here, you could run it up and down your hose clamp. Now we have a ton of clearance with the firewall, and then we're still clearing over here. So this looks like a pretty good position to start. Next step, we're gonna cut the rest of our header so that way we just have our flange with our pipes coming off, and then we can bolt that on and kind of start to visualize what each one is gonna look like. So I got a mock-up of my first outlet here, and I got my collector right here. Here is this piece, I put some marks on it, and then if I move the collector, which I can't do because I don't have a third hand right now to hold the camera and do it, but it'll line up with the bottom right there. It comes in just a little bit like that. So this is looking pretty good. I also previously had a mock steering shaft in here, and that cleared. What I was gonna do is bring this all to the bench, tack it at these marks, and then be able to tack down this piece down here. That way the collector is sort of set where it's going to be. Then we can sort of investigate getting this second outlet and which cylinder would be best not to interfere with the steering shaft itself. So let's get to this bench, put a couple tacks on these pieces, and then we could get our next route going. Okay, so we're gonna wait for our steering components to come in to do our last two pipes on this side so we can get an exact connection here, make sure we're clear. While we're waiting for that, we're gonna move on over to the passenger side header. Okay, we got our second runner tacked in there. You can see it comes down. This is the collector on the bottom port. And now we just got 2 more left. We'll work on number 3 first. Number 3 will come from here. See how it comes down. It'll go on top of this one. And then it has a pretty straight path to get into here. Let's grab some pieces and do some test fitting. So I got my final run from the last cylinder down to the collector, and it's all tacked together minus the one that's right down there. So I don't have it tacked to the collector, this little transition piece, or to my tube coming down. I'm gonna have to do that outside the car because I can't get my welding stuff in there and my head to see. But that's okay because this is gonna need a little adjustment just to line up, but there's plenty of adjustment in the collector. You could move it around a hair to get that joint very tight. So now that that's done, I'm gonna go ahead and just throw a bunch more tacks on where I can while it's in the vehicle. And then we can break off down here where we have our temporary transition pipe welded to the frame of the car. We could break that. That will come loose, then we can unbolt the flange, and then the flange will come off. And then we'll bring this thing to the bench for the finishing work that has to be done. So far, it's looking pretty good. So this side is all tacked together, ready to go back to ultimate headers, finishing work, polishing, making it look pretty. Next, we're back on this side, and now we got our steering shaft in. So these 2 tubes work perfectly where they are, but really where our other 2 ports are, we might have been able to sneak one in here, but the second one wouldn't have worked at all with getting to the far 2 cylinders. So I think bringing the whole collector, taking it off and bringing it back into this location, as long as we don't lose any ground clearance. Just like the other side, you know, the collector ended right around here where the frame started the transition. And moving it back and more towards this way, then we get a path. We could go on this side of the steering shaft, which before we were trying to avoid, trying to hug it really close, but didn't realize how tight the space would be in here. So if we do that, we could probably have 2 pipes running on top of each other into the collector for the front 2 cylinders, and then we'll just have to adapt these guys from where they are to meet the collector on the opposite side. Let's go ahead, unbolt this collector. We'll connect our little temporary pie cut piece, and then we'll weld it to the frame just like the other side, and then we can start mocking it up and building it out. Okay, so I got my layout started for my exit on my first cylinder. Comes down, makes 90, I'm gonna put a piece of straight in to drop that 90 straight down, because it's supposed to be exactly in line with this pipe here, and you can see it's just sitting on top of it with the length that it is right now. But with it sitting on top, that gives me a chance to make a mark, because I could see where this 90 is gonna end right on top. So I made a mark where to cut my piece of straight. So I'm gonna pull this out, chop the end off, and then I'm gonna pull that straight out, chop the end off of that, and then we're gonna try and tie them back together. All 4 runners out of all 4 cylinders going down into the collector. They're all looking pretty good, aesthetically coming out in similar pattern. Also, most importantly, is that our steering, we don't need to have, split shafts steering where we split in the middle with a heim joint. It'll run right through there. And then we also have our frame clearance here. We have our subframe clearance on the bottom under there. And our collector is mounted in a good spot where it transitions nicely into the little cutout in the body where the exhaust is supposed to run into. So we are looking pretty good. Let's get the steering shaft out, and then we'll be on our way. So we got our headers all tacked up, cleaned up all the tape and marks off of them. We're gonna get them back into the Lincoln so we could start mocking up our exhaust system. But that, you'll have to stay tuned to the next episode. So be sure to like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.